what's going on, everybody? It's Not Your Average Josh back here for another movie review, and today I'm here to review the new movie Creed 3, directed by Michael B. Jordan in his directorial debut, in fact. Of course, it's starring Michael B. Jordan, of course, Jonathan Majors as well, playing Damien here. You also have Tessa Thompson back, Bianca Creed. But before I get into my review of Creed 3, I do want to say, hit that like button, leave a comment if this is your first time watching any of my videos. Hit that subscribe button, that is very much appreciated. You can follow me on TikTok and Snapchat where I will post content similar to this. But for the most part, my content will be on this YouTube channel, Not Your Average Josh. So we're going to appreciate all the support, but let's get into this review of Creed 3. Adonis has been thriving in both his career and family life, but when a childhood friend and former boxing prodigy resurfaces, the face-off is more than just a fight. I just recently watched Creed 1 and 2 about a week or two before I went and saw this movie in the theaters, and I definitely maintain that the first one to me is undeniably great. I think just the overall story there, and of course I will get into how the whole Sylvester Stallone situation, I think, affected not only Creed 3, but this whole Creed part of the franchise, of the Rocky franchise, I guess, if you will. I think the first movie was just so powerful. The feelings I felt at the end of that movie leading up to the final fight. Again, everything with Rocky in that movie, if you've seen that movie at all, little spoilers here, his, being diagnosed with cancer, and just him training Adonis. It was all such a great emotional pull, and it fed on, all the movies before in the Rocky series, but also starting this new chapter with the story of Adonis Creed, him growing up in foster care and his dad not being there because of what happened in the Drago fight. The first one was just so great, not only with that, but then just from scene to scene, honestly, I didn't have any issues. I think the pacing was honestly about as great as you can get for a boxing movie. All three of these movies have done a really good job of having enough fights in the movie to keep you excited, but not oversaturating the movie. All three of them have been very character driven. I think the second being the least so, but still being very character driven. The first one is still, I think, undeniably great to me. The second movie, I did think there was a little bit of a fall off. Of course, Ryan Coogler not directing the second movie. I still thought Stephen Cable Jr. did a good job. There was just moments in that from scene to scene that I wasn't as invested. There was some lines that I thought maybe lingered a little too long. A few little more nitpicky things, honestly, overall in that movie. But I still really enjoyed it overall. I did like the story of Drago coming back, and again with Rocky still being in the second one. I did like that emotional story, not only with Adonis dealing with having to fight the son of the person who killed his father, Rocky having to deal with Drago still seemingly being this kind of horrible person, really. The effects that the fight had way back then on Drago and how his country perceives him. I really did love all those ideas, but I still think it was really good, but the first one was great. Now, coming into this Creed 3 movie, I was getting more and more excited as the days were approaching. Jonathan Majors, since I saw Lovecraft Country way back when that premiered a couple years ago, I immediately thought this guy is going to potentially be a superstar actor. He had this charisma. This is immediately like magnetic on the screen. I just really loved him in that. He played such a different character in that than he played in, of course, the newest Ant-Man movie and this Creed 3 movie. When you see him now playing these more villainous characters, it really just shows his prowess as an actor. So going into this, it just felt like it could be very exciting. I was, of course, very interested in Michael B. Jordan, his first directorial debut. How was it going to be? It's a lot still to live up to, these first two Creed movies being very much positively viewed. I am happy to say that I really did have a very good time with this movie. I don't know if it quite got to the first movie. I think the first movie is still king for me out of these three movies, but I do think I did like this one better than the second one. It just, there's really a lot to get into, so I'm going to go ahead and get to my positives first. And let me just go with the acting overall. First off, Michael B. Jordan, just, of course, with the directing alone, I think is very well done here, but just on his acting here, this is the movie that's really a Creed movie. And with that, I will say, of course, everyone's going to be talking about how Sylvester Stallone was not in this movie. There was a whole controversy with Irwin Winkler, and look, I don't really know too much of the details of all that. I've seen, a few shows talk about it, on the YouTube and whatnot. And it all seems definitely very sad, especially having watched the first two movies very recently and then going into this movie. It is very evident, like, the void of not having Rocky even mentioned in this movie. He's mentioned like once and like in just in passing, talking about the fight he had with Drago, but there's never like a personal mention here of, Adonis talking about Rocky, which seems so weird because the first two movies are so about Rocky being there for Adonis on his journey to becoming not only a great fighter but even a better person. And the fact that he just wasn't mentioned here, especially there's just certain events that take place in this movie. I'm not going to spoil anything, but if you haven't seen it, but there's certain events that take place in this movie where it just doesn't make sense that Rocky is not even mentioned, let alone even there in this certain scenes. And I will say, while watching the movie, I really didn't think about it too much. It wasn't anything that took me out of the movie experience, but I will say it is something afterwards that, upon rewatch, it's just going to be there. It is the fact that Rocky wasn't even mentioned. You get, all the business behind the scenes. It's understandable why. It's just they should have done something to where at least you could say, okay, they at least explained it away, but they don't even explain it. So it's just kind of this thing that's there. If you've seen the first two, it just doesn't make quite sense with that. But back to Michael B. Jordan, just in his performance, he's just as great as he was in the first two movies. You can tell he put his emotion in this movie. You could tell he had a passion behind this project, of course, him directing it, but also you can tell he wanted to tell this story of Adonis Creed that hasn't really been brought up yet. It wasn't even mentioned in the first two movies, of Damien, played by Jonathan Majors, and really you feel a lot of different emotions in this movie, and it all just really builds up into that last fight. You feel the anger, the pain, the guilt, almost grief in a way at times, of this story of Adonis having this childhood friend and Damien that was arrested in a scenario that Adonis was at. The cops could have arrested him too, but he ran away, and so he has this guilt about him, and then Damien ended up getting caught up in the system and basically being in jail for 20 years. He finally gets out, and now he runs into Adonis again, and it's almost, you feel that guilt just almost come over him like a wave, because you can almost see in his eyes that he knows he hasn't thought about him enough, to compared to what the relationship they had. They really do a good job of starting out the movie with the flashback of showing them as kids, not showing the whole scenario that went down with the cops, but really already showing the closeness that they had, and it really setting the stage. And they go right to Adonis, and it's years have gone by now. He has a daughter now, which I thought was really beautiful to see him happy, because through the first two movies he's such a likable character and you want to see him succeed. So to see him be in this big house with his wife still, Bianca, and the fact that she's still able to do music at this point, she hasn't lost all her hearing yet. Of course, if you watch the other two movies, she's had that hearing issue. And then just to see again another movie or television show with a deaf person in it, which I really like. It just seemed like it's been very frequent lately. It was in The Boys a while with Kimiko. If you've seen that, of course, The Last of Us lately. If you watch the Henry and Sam episode, you also had it with there. And there's also been other stuff. It just seems like in the recent years, there's been a lot more characters with not only just disabilities, but with people being deaf or mute. It's really cool, though, because it was really done well in this as well. Adonis and Bianca's daughter is about 9 years old, I think, and she has no hearing. Of course, you find that out in the second movie, and that is definitely a very heartbreaking moment. It's very nice to see her be healthy for the most part, of course, other than that condition, and to be happy, living in this nice, beautiful home. And of course, it also sets the stage, though, for what happens with Damien. Damien coming back around. He's been in jail all these years. He was the one. He was older than Adonis, and he was really the top boxer. He was the Golden Glove. He had potential to become maybe potentially a champion one day. And now he's coming back in, and I think the best part of Michael B. Jordan's performance is you just feel the emotion throughout the movie. From scene to scene, you feel all the stuff he's going through. There's a lot of realistic moments. He has some outbursts of anger, pain, and then you also see the moments where he's happy with his wife Bianca or with his mom. Michael B. Jordan did such a good job of just feeling like he became Adonis again for this movie. And of course, Jonathan Majors, I've already mentioned, he is, I'd say, about equally as good as Michael B. Jordan in this movie. He's a great counterpart. He has such subtle emotional moments, like with his physical acting and just look that he'll have on his face when he's having a conversation with either Adonis or even his wife Bianca or just anybody. And then of course the moments in the fights when he's not only fighting Creed, but fighting a fighter named Felix Chavez in this as well. Jonathan Majors just had this presence in this movie of intensity and also moments where you felt his pain, but he would just be so subtle with it. Like, it almost made it more realistic. It wasn't these huge outbursts of just like anger all the time where it felt like fake. It felt very real. He would just go back to a small apartment and just train from the beginning, and then he's eventually trying really this whole movie to get Michael B. Jordan to give him a fight. And that's where some of my issues go, but I'll get into that here in a minute. But yeah, Jonathan Majors is just really good in this movie. The fighting, him and Michael B. Jordan did very well with the choreography and the fighting. And then just even, like I said, the dramatic scenes where you start to feel Damien is jealous of Adonis because he got the career that he wanted, but he ended up taking kind of the rap for him, and he ended up being in jail. You just feel that this guilt wrapped around, and then the jealousy and the emotion and the ambition of both of these people that want to be champion. And even though it was a nice little counter to what I would have thought would have happened, because at the beginning of this movie, you get Adonis and he's retiring. He's having his last fight. He's facing Pretty Ricky Conlon again for his last fight, and he's actually retiring. I did not think they were actually going to go that way this early on, have him retire. But I guess, I mean, it makes sense. You know, boxing, you don't have that long of a shelf life, especially the more fights you have, more injury, more head trauma, and all that stuff. But it was kind of interesting, though, to have Adonis really be kind of out of the fight game, just focusing on his family. And then, of course, to have Jonathan Majors' character, Damien, come back in, and then, of course, eventually bring about Adonis' return where they're going to face off. There's a level of predictability with this movie that I think is going to hold some people back to the ultimate enjoyment they could have. I mean, just, it's hard to avoid the marketing with this movie. Even if you didn't watch a trailer, you pretty much assume that it's going to be Adonis versus Damien at the end of this movie, just because the movie, just the poster was kind of marketed this way of them facing off with each other. So I feel like with that, you always kind of know where this movie's going in the end. I think that's a little bit of a negative for me because I wasn't as invested. And I think that's why I think I like the first one overall so much better, because it was such a new story. Michael B. Jordan's first movie as Adonis Creed, and you didn't know where it was going. You just were on this ride, seeing his rise. And we're here again. It's just kind of expected to where it goes. But anyway, I'll get into more of that here in a minute. As I said, Tessa Thompson as Bianca, she's so good in this movie. You really feel the connection she has with Adonis, the connection that they have as a family with their daughter, and then just, you know, some of the real, like, adult conversations that they have in this movie. It feels like a real couple arguing, not some over the top dramatic things, even though it can get dramatic at times, but it felt like a realistic, either when they were fighting or when they were, you know, showing affection towards each other, just talking about family stuff, talking about, you know, Adonis's mom and her health issues. It all felt so realistic, and she was just such a good character in this, showing her constant care for Adonis, no matter what he was going through, what emotions in this movie. Of course, you got Wood Harris back as Tony Little Duke Burton, and he is in this movie. Of course, that's sort of the thing they kind of moved around as well. This is years down the line. Of course, there's no mention of Rocky in here, so he is really the main trainer of Adonis at this point. And of course, for his last fight, Adonis is still hanging around the gym. It's still the Creed gym, or whatever you want to call it, Creed camp that these fighters come out of. And this is really where he's following this guy who is the main guy at the time, who Adonis is really trying to push, Felix Chavez, played by Jose Benavidez. And that's really where you get Damien, again, coming home from jail, and Adonis gives him a chance to come down to the gym. He ends up sparring with Felix, and you can already tell Damien has this fighting style where he fights a little dirty. It also kind of adds to the intensity with any fight he's in this movie. Just, you're always like, he has such an unorthodox southpaw style, just like he has his shoulders down, like he just seems like it's like he's an uncaged animal, but has this level of control about him. It's like he got this perfect balance of just like when he's punching you, you feel every punch, and that just goes off into the directing as well. But anyways, I think just in terms of kind of roundabout, I'm kind of going everywhere with this review. There's kind of a lot on my mind about this movie. Just kind of round out all the acting. The acting was all really good in this movie. I don't have really any complaints. They even brought back Drago's son, but of course not Drago. Yeah, Dolph Lundgren was on this movie as well. Coincidence? Probably not. It made it feel like the world was still connected, and we're back in this world that the first two Creed movies took place in. Everyone was really good in this. That's what goes into the directing. I think this movie was very very well directed. A fighting style, I had heard going into this, there's a little bit of an anime influence. I didn't quite see that so much, but I'm not a anime guy too much. Like, I've seen anime now and then, but I'm not a hardcore. Seen a lot of anime, so there's some stuff I wouldn't pick up on, but I thought the fighting style overall was a little bit different in its own way, but it was still had that same intensity, same punch, no pun intended, that the first two movies had. I thought that it was just so intense. You were in it. You felt the emotion, especially with the last fight where you have Adonis and Damien going at each other. It just was like, you watching it, you can't help, or for me, I couldn't help but move in my seat as I'm just watching this fight go down. It just felt like you're in the fight, especially the way it was filmed, some of the close-up shots, and then some of the impacts in the hit where you see like the sweat coming off and just the impact of the body blows. It was really an impressive directing job by Michael B. Jordan. Now, where some of my issues come in with this movie, it is some of the directions that the story does go. As I mentioned, you have Damien. Pretty much as soon as he comes home from jail, he's kind of pressuring Adonis to give him a title fight. And right away, if you know anything about fighting at all, or I think honestly it should be kind of a common sense thing, but Damien, he has been in jail for 20 years. He's not even a professional fighter. He's not even an amateur fighter at this point, and he's already demanding a title fight. And unfortunately, the movie goes in a direction where it basically gives him the title fight without proving anything. At first, they do the right thing. Adonis is like, no, can't do that. That's just not how it goes. And they have a situation where they basically have Damien do some nefarious things to get another fighter injured. I won't say quite what. And that ends up causing Adonis to suggest, oh, why don't we put Damien in there? And this whole idea is just not logical. This movie definitely asks for your suspension of belief a few times like this, where in real life, they would just put in another fighter. They would just say, okay, well, I'm sorry, this just can't happen. In real life, this stuff happens sometimes. Fighters get hurt and you have to wait a little bit longer. But in this, they had this scene where Adonis sitting down with the manager of the Felix Chavez, who Damien ends up going against, and he basically brings it up, and he's like, well, there's two other fighters that we can fight, but it'll be at 6 months. And the manager's basically just like being very unrealistic about the situation. He's like, no, we can't do it. We got to fight now. We got to make money now. And it's like, in real life, a manager, would they really be this unrealistic about it? Like, sometimes fighters get hurt, even though obviously this was a intentional thing, but that part of it was kind of very unrealistic. That this guy Damien, who they don't show at all in the movies that he has any amateur fights. He's just been sparring in the gym. The Creed helps run, and that's it. They don't even show him have any amateur fights at all. And he just gets right into this title fight, and he ends up, of course, winning because they got to have that happen. And then that's another part of the predictability of this movie. When he was fighting this Felix Chavez, you pretty much predicted that he was going to win. Like, I even heard people around me in the theater at the time were like, oh yeah, he's gonna knock him out. He's gonna fuck him up. If Damien didn't win, what was gonna happen? The movie was kind of gonna be stagnant at that point. I mean, because then what Damien would have to build up in the amateur level. Of a little bit of a mixed feeling I also have towards Adonis's character in this fight that Damien has with Felix, because he's kind of playing both sides, and this is more of just a critique I have with the character, not necessarily the writing. I get why they did it, to build that conflict even more, that jealousy, that envy. That the feeling of Damien, feeling like the fact that Damien feels like Adonis doesn't believe in him or doesn't want him to win. The whole time going into this fight, Adonis is pretty much promoting and pushing Felix. He wants Felix to win because he's the guy he's pushing that's coming out of his camp, but he'll also go to the back and talk to Damien and be like, man, you're going to do good tonight. You're going to do real good tonight. But then go right to Felix and be like, come on, champ. You're going to knock him out in the first round. It's going to be tough for him to get out the first round. So he's really playing both sides here. And for that, I like the writing of that part. It's just more like, for me, I really like Adonis' character. So that's one part where I'm like, damn, I'm really on Damien's side here. And again, that was good for the movie there. So no complaints there. It's just kind of a little comment on how I felt about his character in that moment. But again, the predictability happens. Damien wins, and then pretty much right after that, they go right into the conflict. You have a few things that happened before, but really get right into this main fight that happened. It does kind of feel a little rushed at times, not necessarily in the actual pacing of the movie, but in terms of, it's almost like they feel like we knew what was coming because of the way they marketed this movie or something. Like they knew they were going to market it this way, because it kind of goes smoothly right into, oh, they're having a conflict now. There's really, it just feels like it was meant to happen and not like something that organically, like, oh, they have a real conflict now. Like Adonis shows up and he's mad. He finds out that Damien did some nefarious shit to get the other person hurt, to where he would be able to fight Felix, and then he ends up winning the World Heavyweight Championship and all that stuff, unified belts and all that. Damien comes out and basically comes at him right there and says, I don't need you. You're not shit. I've been pissed at you for all these years, basically, and I was lying. Any good thing I have said to you is I've seen you. And basically from there, they go right to the training montage. And I will say the training montage in this movie was badass, along with the music. I have to mention that as well. The soundtrack and the composed music for this movie was completely on point. Honestly, I wouldn't necessarily argue with someone if they said that was the best part of this movie, although I'll say the fighting and just the directing overall, the directing of the fighting as well, was probably the best part of this movie, and the emotion behind it. All the music that was played in this movie really was great hype-up music, on point with the feeling and the mood of the moment of whatever it was in. Yeah, classic training montage, 2 different people in different places doing different stuff to get ready for a fight. It was still very impactful, honestly. It got me hyped up for the fight. And then once you get to the fight, I actually thought it went by kind of fast, or relatively fast. Some people said it dragged on a little bit. I can see where maybe in terms of the dramatic flair of it, it did get a little melodramatic in the moment. And it definitely wasn't like the best fight of all the Rocky movies and the Creed movies. It has some great moments in there. And then again, just the fighting style overall was just exciting in general. You do get a very nice ending, I will say, that I think ends good for both characters. That's really my main thoughts on this movie. I kind of mentioned my main little negatives with it. Some, story elements, sometimes they really ask you to suspend your disbelief. I do think there is a level of negativity I have in a way with not even having Rocky mentioned at all. I think that causes a little bit of problems overall in the story of it. And I do think there's just some, not only the suspension of disbelief, but the predictability and some little logical issues within certain scenes and certain moments, certain things that happen in this movie that just it can cause you to pause a little bit. But for me, it never took me out of the movie at all, because I think the direction was so good. The acting, the performances were all very good to great in this movie. And yeah, just very promising to see. I mean, Michael B. Jordan, this is his first directorial debut. Yeah, he's been around Hollywood and watched people for years, but still very talented. Overall, I still really enjoyed this movie. I think I do still like it better than the second movie. Not the first one, though. I still think the first one is king to me in terms of these 3 movies. But that is my main thoughts. I'm going to give Creed 3 an 8 out of 10. Still a very enjoyable movie. I think a great start for Michael B. Jordan in terms of directing. Excited to see what he has in store in the future. And I would definitely be down to see more of these Creed movies. I think the way it leaves off, I could see where they would go that I would be very interested in more in this journey involved with this family, I will say. And hopefully maybe we can get Rocky back for if he's in Creed 4. Please, I mean, come on. It just doesn't make sense after the first 2 movies. That's all I'll say. But I want to hear what you guys think. Have you seen this movie? Did you not care to see it? Is the Sylvester Stallone thing going to be too much for you to where you're not going to want to see it? Do you not give a shit? You're going to see it anyway? And if you did you like it? Did you hate it? Are you more in the middle? I want to hear your thoughts. I very much appreciate all the support I can get. Leave a like. Hit that subscribe button. This is your first time watching any of my videos. It's very much appreciated. You can follow me on TikTok. You can have me on Snapchat, where I'll post content similar to this. But for the most part, my content will be here on this YouTube Not Your Average Josh. We're looking for more videos very soon, and I will talk to you guys later.